Dr. Stephen Mintz, excuse me, sir, is a professor at the University of Texas at Austin. I'm going to get through this quickly because I hear everyone's tummy rumbling, okay? He's a leading educational innovator and an award-winning teacher and author. Professor Mintz is the founding director of the University of Texas Systems Institute for Transformational Learning. Dr. Mintz is responsible for making a quality education more accessible, affordable, and successful. To achieve this goal, his institute designs breakthrough pathways to a meaningful credential and creates technologies to support immersive and personalized education and harnesses the power of fine-grained learning and analytics. He blogs on Inside Higher Education and Psychology Today. His writings have also been featured in the New York Times and the Washington Post. There's so much more to learn about this man. Please download his full biography online. Please welcome Dr. Mintz to Mad Scientist.
I hope it's okay if I report to an admiral as opposed to a general, William McRaven, and my institute is his special forces since he's joined the academy. Okay. Now, if you doubt the importance of higher education, let me give you one statistic. Since the Great Recession, our economy has created 11.8 million jobs. Of those jobs, 3/4 have gone to people with bachelor's degrees or more, and 1/3 of the jobs have gone to people with graduate degrees. Now, what's my takeaway from that? If we want a nimble, agile military that can deal with the threats that we're going to be facing in the future, many of which are really unpredictable, then we have to ensure that we have the best educated military in the world. We have to have an education that works at the speed of life, not at the speed of lectures, not at the speed of seminars, and I shouldn't probably add, not at the speed of conferences, right? We have a new generation of learners in our military, and they're not going to learn in traditional ways. Don't hand them instruction manuals and expect to get the results that you want. We need to be creative, and above all, we need to rethink the use of technology as a tool in education. Too often, technology is thought of as a way to transmit content, or technology is a way to have people perform drills, and that's not at all the way we should be thinking about technology. We didn't learn to fly by flapping our arms like wings, right, like birds. And when you think about technology in education, you have to think about it differently than just a new mode for lectures or exercises. That is, we need to be thinking in terms of serious gaming. We need to be thinking in terms of simulations. We need to be thinking in terms of virtual reality and augmented reality. We need to be thinking about virtual classrooms. We need to be thinking about analytics. My job at the University of Texas System, we have 250,000 students, incredibly diverse. Half of our students are Pell Grant eligible. That is, they're in the bottom 40% of the income distribution, 45% African American Latino, like the Army, right? Diverse. And we have to be way more successful. And to do that, we have to do what I'm going to advise you to do. Think outside the box. That is, think outside all of the boxes. I needed to think outside of classrooms. I needed to think outside of credit hours. I needed to think outside of fixed terms. I need to break through molds so we could really begin to think afresh. And as you emphasize training and education in new ways, I advise you to do exactly the same thing. My experience as a professor, I've taught 40,000 students in face-to-face classes. I had 2% of all the population of Houston in my face-to-face history classes. My students who joined the military, the biggest inducement was education, right? The training that they would get, the preparation they'd get for the future. The most valuable people you're going to have in the military are the people who are like that, right? Who really have the acumen, the intellectual acuity that's going to make a huge difference whatever rank they are. So let's talk about how we can get them there. And I'm going to talk a bit about how I'm trying to get my 250,000 students there. But the first thing I want to stress is that the world is changing under our feet. 2 weeks ago, Microsoft announced that it will be offering certificate programs on edX. That's the MOOC provider, those free online courses. And the first one's in data science, a series of courses run by Microsoft. You will not get a bachelor's degree. You will not get a master's degree. You will get a certificate from Microsoft, and that certificate will get you a job. And if I'm a university, I am quaking in my feet because smart kids, ambitious kids, are going to decide maybe that it would be better to get that certificate from Microsoft than to go to one of my universities, right? I mean, it's a challenge. Or let's take another example. The single biggest provider, nonprofit provider of education in the United States is a company you've never even heard of called General Assembly. We often associate them with coding academies, but what they are just-in-time training for certain kinds of jobs. And they have employer connections, so you complete their courses, you get a job. That's a real threat to my universities. In 1999, there were corporate universities. The most famous were Hamburger U, that was McDonald's, and Ringling Brothers Clown College. Today there are 4,000 corporate universities, and they have names like Deloitte University, the big consulting firm. They don't offer bachelor's degrees, right? They don't need to. And there, again, are going to be very talented kids who are going to decide that is a better route than the traditional route. You know, the point I'm trying to make is universities have been with us for more than 1,000 years, and they're under siege, right? The world is changing under our feet. The landscape is shifting, and if we don't adjust, we're not going to be around, at least not in the form that we are right now. And by analogy, I think every institution in our society, including the military, needs to think really seriously about this rapidly changing, unpredictable, volatile environment that we live in, and we better figure out avenues towards the future. We're all special forces now. Or take another example. Georgia Tech has a top 10 computer science program. You can take it on their campus, $47,000, or you can take it online for $7,000. And it turned out, kind of unpredicted by them, all the people who are taking the on-campus program are international students, and American students are doing the online version. Interesting, right? Who would have guessed that? But it's a big change when you start taking name brand top 10 programs and you offer them at a cut rate price. Different world. Now, I'm from Texas. We got three choices, right? You play offense, you play defense, or you stand on the sidelines. And in Texas, there's only one answer, right? Play offense. And we all need to play offense. We live in a challenging environment, right? So my chancellor's advice is just do it. His message is completely clear, and I think it's the same as yours. He empowers his lieutenants, and he fires them if they don't do the job, right? But he gives you the resources as long as you have a plan and says, do it, right? And that's the situation I think we're in. We can't stand on the sidelines. Do that, and we will lose in every domain. First challenge that I have to confront, the dirty little secret of American higher education is that in four-year institutions, less than 60% of students ever get a bachelor's degree. In my system, 49% of my students will get nothing but debt when they are done. They will not graduate. They will not get a degree. But it's worse than that, because many of my students who wanted to go into the critically important fields of the future, which are mainly STEM fields, 50% of those students will transfer out of STEM. I'm a historian. They might become history majors. I guess that's good for me, but it's not good for them, right? They had a dream, and that dream got busted, and not by the Ghostbusters, right? So that there's a lot of sadness going on sort of beneath the surface, and we need to be thinking about that. So my first challenge is this student success challenge. I need to bring more students to a bright future. Second challenge, I've got completely different student body, completely different demographics than I used to have. We used to think that college students were 18 to 22 years old and they went to a residential campus. Not true anymore. My students are older. My students have families. They have children. They have full-time jobs. This is a different generation, right? And if I don't meet them where they are, they won't succeed and I won't succeed. So understanding who you're dealing with is really crucial here. You know, at one of my campuses in the lower Rio Grande Valley, average household income $23,000, lowest income in the United States. A third of my students speak English as a second language, and a third of my students are off the grid. They don't have broadband connection. They don't have cell phone connectivity. We have to think about who we're dealing with and what are the strategies to get them to success. Okay. So we got to get more students to graduate. I got to get them through quicker. I have to get them to success in areas that matter. And that's my challenge, but you have parallel challenges. Just to show you how really challenging the situation is, in Texas, if you take 100 eighth graders, 20 will eventually get either an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree. Oh, it's way better in New York, right? They're a richer state. They really pride themselves on education. If you take ninth graders in New York, I couldn't get the eighth grade figure, 23% of their students will get an associate's degree or bachelor's degree. This is a nationwide problem. The success of the United States always hinged on the fact that we were the best educated country in the world. It's not so true anymore, and our higher education system brings in a lot of people, but it's really inefficient in getting them out. You can see the payoff from a college degree. Areas of growth. But we have other problems. Under the traditional way that we teach at my university, students aren't spending too much time in the learning process. If we take time spent studying per week during the academic year, it's fallen by more than half over time. Clearly, I've got to engage my students in new ways, or they're not going to spend their time studying. By most of our measures of learning outcomes, they're very mixed. We're not seeing as much improvement as we should. Given the investment that we're making, we've got to do something about that. Here you can see how people spend their time. Studying is a very tiny portion of this, unfortunately. Cost challenge. We all know about how higher ed's costs are going up faster than anything, faster than healthcare, faster than housing. Got to do something about this. This is not something that could be kept going forever. Student debt is making up the difference. Rising, rising, rising. These are the figures for Texas, but it would be the same or worse in other states because Texas has about the lowest tuition of any public university system. Then there's the business model challenge. When I would teach 592 students in my big class and 150 students in my little class, that generated a lot of revenue for the institution, which then paid for small seminars later on, right? But now those students take those classes in high school, or they take them online from various providers. They're not taking them from the University of Texas anymore. And so the business model doesn't work any longer. Got to do something about that. You can sell for less than your cost, but you can't do it for long. So how do institutions deal with this? Well, higher ed's dealt with it in a pretty unsavory way. We rely increasingly on part-time professors who we pay roughly $2,500 a course, right? And in order to get a living income, you got to teach a lot of those $2,500 a course courses. It's not a very desirable solution, right? It's not a very humane solution, and it's probably not a politically sustainable solution either. And then there's the equity challenge. Let me just give you a couple of statistics. At Yale, where I got my PhD, they spend on instruction and student support, not on the buildings, $130,000 a year per student. Okay? And at Cal State Long Beach, they spend $9,000 a year on instruction and student support. Which has the students who probably need the most emphasis on instruction and support? Clearly, Cal State Long Beach. And which get it? Yale. I had a student there won a Pulitzer Prize 3 years after I had him, and I didn't make him better, I can assure you. He could have done it on his own. My job was to get out of the way. Okay. But Yale spent, an almost absurd amount of money on his education. We've got to find a way to do it more efficiently. And the best predictor of whether you're going to get a college degree, your parents' income. It's ridiculous, right? We don't believe in our society that merit is distributed by parental income, and yet this is by far the best predictor of whether you're going to wind up with a bachelor's degree. We need a different approach. We need a different solution. So we need to move from the industrial age to the information age. In the industrial age, education was front-loaded, right? You went to high school, maybe you went to college, that was it. Can't be anymore. Education has to be continuous in our age. The average baby boomer held 11 jobs in 3 different career fields. That's the baby boomers. Those are your parents or grandparents, right? And for this generation, it's going to be even more. We don't know yet, but we'll soon know, right? And so you're going to need constant retraining on the go. You're going to need just-in-time education. Can't all be front-loaded anymore. Also, we had a mass production model of education. I lectured, you listened, and it didn't matter whether you were interested in what I had to say or understood what I said or anything, right? Because it was one size fits all. That doesn't work. Amazon doesn't work that way. Netflix doesn't work that way. Nobody works that way in today's information economy except for the academy. Can't be forever. We had a transmission model. I send to you. Today's learners don't like that model. My students won't sit quietly in class, or if they do, it's because they're looking at their cell phone, because they're bored by what I had to say. If it's not bi-directional, it's not going to work, right? We need to embrace that in all the training and education we do. We had a sink or swim approach. It was okay if at UT Austin 50% of the students failed engineering. That's just the way it was, right? Some won, some lost. In this world, we can't have that kind of rate of failure, especially by people who have the talent to do it, if we only adjust the circumstances. And then we had this lone eagle approach to teaching. I design my own course, I teach it when I want, and I teach whatever I want, right? That's how the academy worked. Can't do that anymore. It's really cost inefficient. When I go see a doctor now, I get poked and prodded by a physician's assistant, right? Because the doctor's too valuable for that. I have cancer, I see the doctor, right? And in a lot of areas of life, we need to move to that model. Really expensive, rare talent will be used where it's most valuable, not everywhere. So we're trying to think about new pathways to student success, and I'll just mention a few of them that we're going to be instituting over the next few years. One is a pathway that begins in high school. All the courses that you take shouldn't be in college. Part of our problem is that the high school courses aren't well aligned to college courses. If we could get them better aligned, then we can move students through more expeditiously. Another solution is what we call stackable credentials. Why should the BA or BS degree be the be-all and end-all of education? Instead, we can break it up into smaller certificates and specializations, badges, and the like, which have real career value. And the flip side of that is we can take the training that you do in the military, and we can give it credit. So that when someone from the military who's gone through really extensive training, we can get them through to a bachelor's degree very quickly, because you've already done a lot of the learning. Our job is just to get you through to the finish line, but you've already done much of what needs to be done. You know, currently the situation's not good, where the transfer of credits is not transparent at all. And then the other areas that we're particularly interested in is what we call open loop education. That's lifelong training that's just in time, just when you need it, just what you need, not what we thought you needed. This is what my chancellor had to say and about the institute that I run, but I think it's good advice all the time. That is, you can't get to success by being timid, right? Make your mistakes with confidence. One thing that I've learned is if you come in with an idea, mainly there are vacuums and people are looking for good ideas. And, you know, I think that challenge, you know, in this new world that we live in, hierarchy is sort of disappearing in important ways. It's not that there aren't leaders, and it's not that there aren't decision makers, but all of us are empowered. It's not just terrorists who are super empowered individuals. We all need to be entrepreneurial. Each of us in our role has to take charge. Each of us has to sell what we think is right. This is a different world, right? This much more fluid world where our success is dependent upon everybody being smart and operational. So we're trying to re-engineer every facet of the educational experience, and we're hoping that we're going to do this with Army University. We're in discussions with the Defense Department's Advanced Distributed Learning. We're working with Cyberforce because the problems are so big. They're bigger than Texas, right? They're so big that we need to collaborate if we're going to solve these problems. Let me give you an example of one of the things we need to tackle. We have different language that we're talking about, but we're talking about exactly the same thing. The Army talks about a universal transcript, and this is the idea that every individual would have a transcript that they would own that includes not only your academic accomplishments, the courses you've passed and the grades you got, but your non-academic proficiencies as well, the training that you went through. This is obvious, right, that we need this. It will only work if we do it at scale. So you put together the Army, and you put together Texas, and you put together California and Georgia, and after a while, you've got real scale. We can make this happen, but we can only make it happen if we do it at scale. Or another area, we're developing a cyber security program in Texas. It's the #1 ranked program in the country. And we're working with Cyberforce, so we agree on all the competencies that you have to have in that area. And we're developing, in collaboration, a series of credentials that you could get along the way. You don't have to get a bachelor's degree, you don't have to get a master's degree, but you have to get the credentials that would stack up into degrees. But again, they only work if everybody agrees, right? If Otherwise, it's just like grades. It's just my opinion of how good you are. We need assessments so we know that people have accomplished the skills. And again, it only works if we work together, if we collaborate. So we're trying to create new pathways, we're trying to create new technologies, we're trying to create new support services for our students. Let me move on. The most interesting thing we've been doing is we've been working on new learning technologies. I've spent $15 million on an app on an iPad. And one student wrote an op-ed piece for a periodical called The College App That Changed My Life. Down in the Rio Grande Valley, of our students, 2 of the students had ever seen an iPad. We're talking about a, pretty poor part of the country. Okay? And these were students who didn't buy textbooks because the textbooks cost too much money in this program. They cost about $1,200 a semester. They weren't going to buy them. Or if they were going to buy them, they waited till their financial aid came through, which was 3 or 4 weeks into the semester, which was useless, right? So we gave them all of the content for their course on an iPad. And the way the iPad worked, because they didn't have broadband access, Wi-Fi access at home, when you walked onto campus, it downloaded and uploaded. And when you walked away, you had all the material there, right? And everything was bilingual. It was in Spanish as well as English, because we want to create kind of bilingual students to the extent we can. And anyway, for a lot of the students, it really helped with technical material they were provided. And we spent a lot of money on simulations and animations and virtual reality and immersive learning experiences, which I'll be happy to show off at some point, because that's the way kids learn now. And another advantage of the iPads, we could send them into the field doing clinical experiences, and they can still communicate back to their class, right? We're creating virtual classrooms, because that's the way the real adult world works now. So this technology was not just drills and skills. This was to really transform the digital portion of the learning experience. And then there was another advantage for us. We had click-level data on student engagement and student performance. We knew everything about those students. We knew which questions they had trouble with. We know whether they tried again when they got a question wrong. We know how often they reached out to their professor or their teaching assistant. We knew things about our students that we'd never known before. Every Tuesday, we would go over every student in our prototype program, 130 students. We'd go over everything about them to make sure they were on track, right? We can do that now. This way we could intervene when it mattered. One thing we discovered, we had a, hard to believe, in chemistry we had a pass rate of 29%. 71% of the students who took chemistry failed. And chemistry is the key to 35 majors. So you fail chemistry, you don't go anywhere in a STEM-related field. You don't go into healthcare. You don't go into anything engineering-related. Okay? We discovered if we extended the semester by 5 weeks, those students passed the class. It wasn't that they weren't smart enough. It wasn't that they couldn't cut it. It wasn't that we were separating the wheat from the chaff. those students had the capability, they just needed a little more time. And we were able to figure that out. And with 5 weeks, we got the pass rate from 29% to over 80%. This is ridiculous, right? So of course we've extended it to all the students at that university who are in chemistry, right? You discover things this way through a data-rich approach. So what's my takeaway from all this? The future is here. We need to take advantage of this. You know what you want, just as I know what I want. You know, you want people who are nimble and agile and able to think through unpredictable situations and take charge. And that's what education should really be about. And I'm hoping that working together, because your students look an awful lot, your soldiers look an awful lot like my students, that we can begin to solve some of these problems at scale, and we can do things together we could never do alone. I heard one thing from Kira that is so exciting to me. Our country has, at this moment, over 200,000 vacancies in cybersecurity. In Houston, where there's the largest medical center in the country, they can find one person for every 8 cybersecurity jobs they need. Just can't do it. But we're going to be scaling programs, and think of having those students do challenge projects or internships with you all. That way you get more talent cheap, that is free, and these students get lots of real-world experience. That strikes me as a win-win situation. So we have a new world. Let's see what we can make of it. Thank you.
Let's take one question. Sir. Let's get a microphone to this gentleman right here.
Hey, how you doing? I just have one question. Based on what you were talking about, it kind of got my mind jogging a little bit as far as, you know, bachelor's degrees and stuff like that now. Are we discussing maybe a decreased emphasis on electives for bachelor's degrees and such? Where I'm going with that is, you know, a lot of military students, just for talking's sake, between life experience and, you know, training and military experience, a lot of their transfers to bachelor's degrees go into electives.
Yeah, we can't live with that. Needless to say, my chancellor can't live with that, coming from the military. What we're trying to do is create pathways that we view as synergistic. Let me give an example of what I mean by that. Let's say you want to go into the health professions. So if in our pathway, your literature class is on the experience of disease and illness, and your history class is the history of disease and public health, and your math class is health informatics, that is health statistics. In other words, everything is designed to fit together. No waste. No, I mean, you could take electives if you want to take electives, but we don't want you to, really. Right, we want you to become a well-rounded professional. And a professional is going to need to know about ethics and, you know, things, but it's going to be tailored for what you want. You know, with more and more of our students older, they are not there to navel gaze, right? They are there for a purpose. And anything that deviates from that purpose, they're not interested in, and it's going to turn them off. I can't deal with that. We've got to develop a different kind of trajectory towards a goal. Needs to be much more individualized, much more personalized, much more adaptive, much more focused. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Dr. Mintz, as you pointed out, the world is changing. Our institutions have to change with them. As we always say in the Army, our most important asset is always our people and how we educate and also train for people. We've got to continue to change that and take advantage of what's going on. General Mangum and I used to work for your current chancellor, and Admiral McRaven had a saying which was, you're either going to be a zealot or a martyr. So it's clear that you're a zealot, and for that, you are now an official mad scientist with the clever cup and your piece. Thank you.
Well, our view is that we'll see in 4 years where the chancellor is. My suspicion is he's not going to be at the University of Texas system.
Indeed, sir.
We will be sad about that, but
You're
the
definitely
country
a zealot.
might be better off.
Thank you.